Previously, on University of Murder, 4 Dead in Idaho. In episode 1, we walk through the horrific murders at 1122 King Road. The brutal slayings of 4 University of Idaho students, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. We examined who they were, the vibrant lives they lived, and the sudden void their deaths left behind. We also looked at the community's initial reaction, the fear, the confusion, and the heartbreak that rippled across Moscow, Idaho, and far beyond. In episode 2, we shifted the spotlight to the accused, Bryan Kohberger. We explored his background, the criminology studies, his strange behaviors, his arrest across the country in Pennsylvania. We introduced the key issues in the case, the DNA evidence, the surveillance footage, the cell phone data, and the looming question of whether the defense could raise enough doubt to fight the mountain of evidence stacked against him. If you haven't seen those first 2 episodes, we encourage you to go back and watch them before diving in here. They provide the foundation for what comes next: the courtroom battle, the stunning plea, and the voices of the victims' families. Once Bryan Kohberger was extradited to Idaho, the case began in Latah County, where the University of Idaho killings occurred. But almost immediately, concerns surfaced about whether a fair trial could ever be possible in Moscow, a small, tight-knit college town where nearly everyone knew someone touched by the tragedy. The defense argued that pre-trial publicity and emotional responses had so thoroughly infected the community that they were essentially jury-proof. Indeed, a Defense Commission survey found that 98% of respondents recognized the case, and 70% of those had already formed the opinion that Kohberger was guilty. In one staggering response, a resident even claimed they'd burn the courthouse down if he were acquitted. Judge John Judge granted the defense's change of venue motion, citing extreme coverage, Moscow's small size, and logistical challenges, including limited courthouse capacity and insufficient sheriff resources. By September 2024, the Idaho Supreme Court officially ordered the case transferred to Ada County, the state's most populous county, where Boise is located. Boise's larger population and facilities offered a more neutral pool of jurors and a courtroom capable of handling high-profile proceedings. Dubbed by some as a legal chess match, the venue change set the stage for what would be a dramatically different kind of trial, one that ultimately would never reach a public jury, thanks to the plea that followed. In Boise, the legal teams clashed. The prosecution laid out its foundation: DNA found on a knife sheath recovered at the crime scene, cell phone records tracing Kohberger's movements, and surveillance footage showing his car near the King Road house. This evidence, authorities revealed, began with DNA found on a K-bar knife sheath. From there, investigators used genealogical techniques via DNA and a trash pull method from Kohberger's parents' home to confirm a genetic match. Surveillance videos and cell tower data later placed his vehicle near the scene at critical times. The evidence was circumstantial, to be sure, but the prosecution's case was solid. The defense countered at every turn, challenging the chain of custody for the DNA, arguing potential lab errors, questioning digital tracking, and even suggesting the knife sheath might have been planted. They filed motions to suppress the DNA evidence, claiming law enforcement mishandled genetic samples. They even went as far as floating the possibility that the sheath was intentionally placed by the real perpetrator. Judge Stephen Hippler rejected the suppression attempts, ruling that Kohberger had no reasonable expectation of privacy in crime scene evidence, and that investigative genetic genealogy, also called IgG, did not violate constitutional rights. He wrote that IgG, though contentious, was constitutional, and also ruled that the trash pull evidence was permissible. Throughout this process, legal filings flew back and forth. Hundreds of pages of motions debated death penalty eligibility, DNA methods, and the admissibility of digital and forensic evidence. Attorneys also contested witness testimony rules and the use of terms like touch DNA in court. For months, the public braced for what promised to be a long, grueling trial. Media and legal watchers prepared for extensive witness lists, expert cross-questioning, and high-stakes courtroom warfare, the kind of trial that would plaster headlines for weeks. And then came the moment no one saw coming. Before the trial could even begin, jury selection halted. Kohberger struck a deal with the prosecution. He would plead guilty, and the state would take the death penalty off the table. And with that, the legal battle was cut short, and the case was sent immediately toward sentencing. In a stunning reversal, Bryan Kohberger changed his plea from not guilty to guilty. The announcement caused shockwaves across the state of Idaho. Instead of jury selection, instead of weeks of testimony and months of deliberation, the world would hear 3 words from the defendant: "I plead guilty." For reporters, it was chaos, stories rewritten in real time. For newsrooms, a scramble to update headlines as the plea deal blindsided both the media and public alike. The cliffhanger of the trial evaporated overnight. For the victims' families, it was a 180-degree turn that produced a tidal wave of emotions. For some, it was relief. The relief that they would not have to endure the agony of a full trial. But it also collided with deep frustration. They would never hear all of the evidence laid bare in public. For others, there was anger. The anger that Kohberger would be able to live out his natural life, a luxury not afforded any of the victims. For them, the plea agreement was an unnecessary and unwelcome capitulation by the prosecution. For Judge Stephen Hippler, his role shifted instantly. He was no longer in charge of a complex trial. Rather, his focus was turned to sentencing, a very different kind of responsibility. And with the plea entered, only one thing remained: the voices of the victims' families, whose impact statements would now become the centerpiece of the courtroom narrative. Their grief, the courtroom's single, unassailable truth. The victim impact statements began with the surviving roommates who had remained anonymous until that moment. Dylan Mortensen, her voice trembling, described panic attacks in a world shattered. "He took away my ability to trust the world around me, shattered me in places I didn't know could break." Mortensen also shared how she functions in a state of perpetual alert. "My nervous system never got the message that it is over, and that everyday life now takes place in the shadow of her trauma." Bethany Funk's statement, read by her friend Emily Allant, spoke of survivor's guilt, the fear of being targeted next, and the unending terror she still lives with. "I was scared the person who did this would come for me next," she said. "I have not slept through a single night since this happened. Every day I remind myself to live for them." Then came the families. Kaylee's mother, Kaylee Goncalves, confronted Kohberger through her grief. "Hell will be waiting. You are nothing. You are officially the property of the state of Idaho, where your fellow inmates are anxiously awaiting your arrival." Steve Goncalves, Kaylee's father, roared his condemnation. "Today you've lost control. You picked the wrong families. Master's degree? You're a joke. You're going to prison and we're laughing at you." Maddy Mogen's grandmother, Kim Cheeley, spoke of the crushing grief that followed. Depression, therapy, and a pain that she said will linger forever, though she's grateful not to have lived through the horror itself. Xana Kernodle's stepfather, Randy Davis, shook with emotion. "You're gonna go to hell. You're evil. You took our children. You are gonna suffer, man." Kaylee's sister, Alivea Goncalves, stunned the courtroom and the world with her stunning takedown of Kohberger. She was in complete control of the courtroom and cut Kohberger down to size from word 1. "Sit up straight when I talk to you," she commanded Kohberger.
The truth is, my sister Kaylee and her best friend Maddie were not yours to take. They were not yours to study, to stalk, or to silence. They are everything that you could never be. Loved, accepted, vibrant, accomplished, brave, and powerful. Because disappointments like you thrive on pain, on fear, and on the illusion of power. And I won't feed your beast. Instead, I will call you what you are. Sociopath, psychopath, murderer. Some of these might be familiar, so sit up straight when I talk to you. How does it feel to know the only thing you failed more miserably at than being a murderer is trying to be a rapper? Where is the murder weapon? The clothes you wore that night? If you were really smart, do you think you'd be here right now? What's it like needing this much attention just to feel real? You're terrified of being ordinary, aren't you? Do you feel anything at all? Or are you exactly what you always feared? Nothing. You didn't win. You just exposed yourself as the coward you are. You're a delusional, pathetic, hypochondriac loser who thought you were so much smarter than everybody else. You wanted so badly to be different, to be special, to be better, to be deep, to be mysterious. You found yourself thinking you were better than everyone else, and you thought you could figure out the human psyche and see through it, all while tweaked out on heroin. Lurking in the shadows made you feel powerful because no one ever paid you any attention in the light. You thought you were exceptional, all because of a grade on a paper. You thought you were elite because your online IQ test from 2010 told you so. All of that effort just to seem important. It's desperate. There is a name for your condition, though. Your inflated ego just didn't allow you to see it. Wannabe. You act like no one could ever understand your mind, but the truth is you're basic. You're a textbook case of insecurity disguised as control. You are not profound. You're pathetic. You aren't special or deep, not mysterious or exceptional. Don't ever get it twisted again. No one is scared of you today. No one is intimidated by you. No one is impressed by you. No one thinks that you are important. You orchestrated this like you thought you were God. Now look at you, begging a courtroom for scraps. You spent months preparing, and still all it took was my sister in a sheath. You work so hard to seem dangerous, but real control doesn't have to prove itself. The truth is, the scariest part about you is how painfully average you turned out to be. The truth is, you're as dumb as they come. Stupid, clumsy, slow, sloppy, weak, dirty. Don't ever try to convince yourself you mattered just because someone finally said your name out loud. You want the truth? Here's the one you'll hate the most. If you hadn't attacked them in their sleep, in the middle of the night, like a pedophile, Kaylee would have kicked your fucking ass. Thank you.
Thank you.
The courtroom fell silent. Finally, Judge Stephen Hippler took the bench. At times, he paused to steady his voice, his eyes brimming with tears, an extraordinary break from protocol that revealed something deeply human from the bench. He began by acknowledging that motive may never be understood, and that continuing to focus on why only served to give Kohberger relevance he seemed to crave. He warned that pursuit of explanation risked prolonging the killer's attention, a sentiment rooted in compassion, not concession. Then came the blow. Judge Hippler called Bryan Kohberger a faceless coward, a savage irony since he was no longer masked behind anonymity, a coward who slithered through the sliding glass door at 1122 King Road and now stands unmasked. He condemned the murders as senseless, acts of evil carried out against defenseless victims, and spoke of the immeasurable devastation those killings inflicted on families and the entire community. Hippler stripped away any illusion of redemption. Truth be told, I'm unable to come up with anything redeeming about Mr. Kohberger, he said. His grotesque acts of evil have buried and hidden anything that might have been good or intrinsically human about him. He handed down the sentence, 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, 1 for each murder, plus 10 years for burglary. He also imposed fines, $50,000 per murder count and $5,000 in civil penalties per victim. With that, the sentence became fixed. Kohberger will never leave prison. Judge Hippler offered closure, a rare moment of finality in an emotionally charged proceeding. It's time that he be consigned to the ignominy and isolation of perpetual incarceration, he declared, ending Kohberger's hold on attention and beginning the healing process for the families. The gavel fell, the courtroom emptied, the case was over. In the end, Bryan Kohberger's fate was sealed not only by evidence, but by the strength of the family's voices. Their words ensured that the final chapter of this story belonged not to the killer, but to Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan, and to the loved ones who will never stop speaking for them. Life goes on in Moscow, Idaho. Bulldozers have erased the King Road house from the landscape. As new classes of students arrive on the University of Idaho campus each year, the trauma of the events of November 13, 2022, slowly evolves from a collectively experienced trauma to lore passed down through the generations of students. But the memory of the 4 students who lost their lives on that fateful night will never be forgotten. This concludes Season 1 of University of Murder, 4 Dead in Idaho. If you found this story compelling, please like this video and subscribe for more stories of murder on campus. University of Murder is all about crime on campus. If there is a college killing you'd like us to explore, let us know in the comments. In our next season, we'll move from Idaho to Illinois and examine the mass shooting committed by Stephen Philip Kazmierczak at Northern Illinois University in 2008, a tragedy that still echoes through DeKalb to this day. We will visit the campus and immerse ourselves in the stories that unfolded on that day. Stay tuned.